Thank you and welcome to our podcast, My Personal Library. I am Pradnya Talikoti, a filmmaker by profession, and I'm going to read and share my personal thoughts on some of my favorite stories from various books, authors, genres, etc. And a small disclaimer: rights of these stories are with the respective publishers or authors. This podcast is produced by Pixels Unlimited and narrated by me, that is Pradnya Talikoti. Today I'm going to read a short story written by O. Henry, The Cosmopolite in a Cafe. William Sidney Potter, a better known by his pen name O. Henry, was an American short story writer. He was master of surprise endings, who wrote about the life of an ordinary people in New York City. A twist of plot, which turns on an ironic or coincidental circumstance, is typical of O. Henry stories. Some of his works include The Gift of Maggie, The Duplicity of Hargreaves, and The Ransom of Red Chief. His legacy includes the O. Henry Award, an annual prize awarded to outstanding short stories. The Cosmopolite in a Cafe. Before we start the story, it's important to understand what is cosmopolite. So, cosmopolite is someone that fashions themselves as a person or citizen of the world, one that is truly at home in any location or setting. Such a person would be free from any local attachments and prejudice. So now to the story. At midnight, the cafe was crowded. By some chance, the little table at which I sat had escaped the eyes of incomers, and two vacant chairs at it extended their arms with venal hospitality to the influx of patrons. And then a cosmopolite sat in one of them, and I was glad, for I had a theory that since Adam, no true citizen of the world has existed. We hear of them, we see foreign labels on much luggage, but we find travelers instead of cosmopolites. I invoke your consideration of the scene. The marble-top tables, the range of leather upholstered wall seats, the gay company, the ladies dressed in demi-state toilets, speaking in an exquisite visible chorus of taste, economy, opulence, or art, the sedulous and largest loving Garshons, the music wisely catering to all with its rates upon the composers, the melange of talk and laughter, and if you will, the Wurzburger in the tall glass cones that bend to your lips as a ripe cherry sways on its branch to the beak of Robber J. I was told by the sculptor from Mongchang that scene was truly Parisian. My cosmopolite was named E. Rushmore Coghlan, and he will be heard from next summer at Coney Island. He is to establish a new attraction there. He informed me, offering kingly diversion. And then his conversation rang along parallels of latitude and longitudes. He took the great round world in his hand, so to speak familiarly, contemptuously, and it seemed no larger than a seed of Mauritiano cherry in a table-d'hôte grapefruit. He spoke disrespectfully of the equator. He skipped from continent to continent. He derided the zones. He mopped up the high seas with his napkin. With a wave of his hand, he would speak of certain bazaar in Hyderabad. Whiff, he would have you on skis in Lapland. Zip, now you rode the breakers with Kanakas at Kalaikahiki. Presto, he dragged you through an Arkansas post-rock swamp, let you drive for a moment on alkali plain of his Idaho ranch, then whirled you into the society of Viennese archdukes. Anon, he would be telling you of coal he acquired in Chicago lake breeze, and how old Escamilla cured in Buenos Aires with hot infusion of the chuchula weed. You would have addressed a letter to E. Rushmore Coghlan Esquire, the Earth, solar system, the universe, and have mailed it, feeling confident that it would be delivered to him. I was sure that I had found at last the one true cosmopolite since Adam. And I listened to his worldwide discourse, fearful lest I should discover in it the local note of the mere globetrotter. But his opinions never fluttered or drooped. He was as impartial to cities, countries, and continents as the winds of gravitation. And as E. Rushmore Coghlan prattled of his little planet, I thought with a glee of great, almost cosmopolite, who wrote for the whole world and dedicated himself to Bombay. In a poem, he has to say that there is pride and rivalry between the cities of the earth, and that the men that breed from them, they traffic up and down, but cling to their cities, hem as a child to the mother's gown. And whenever they walk by roaring streets unknown, they remember their native city, most faithful, foolish, fond, making her mere breath name, their bond upon their bond. And my glee was roused because I had caught Mr. Kipling napping. Here I had found a man not made from dust, one who had no narrow boasts of birthplace or country, one who, if he bragged at all, would brag of his whole round globe against the Martians and inhabitants of the moon. Expression on this subject so precipitated from E. Rushmore Coghlan by the third corner to our table. While Coghlan was describing to me the topography along the Siberian Railway, the orchestra glided into the medley. The concluding air was Dixie, and as the accelerating notes tumbled forth, they were almost overpowered by the great clappings of hands from almost every table. It is worth a paragraph to say that this remarkable scene can be witnessed every evening in numerous cafes in city of New York. Tons of brew have been consumed over theories to account for it. Some have conjectured hastily that all the southerners in town hie themselves to cafes at nightfall. This applause of rebel air in northern city does puzzle a little, but it is not insolvable. The war with Spain, many years generous mint and watermelon crops, a few long shot winners at New Orleans racetrack, and the brilliant banquets given by the Indiana and Kansas citizens who pose the North Carolina society have made the South rather a fad in Manhattan. Your manicure will lisp softly that her left forefinger reminds her so much of a gentleman's in Richmond, Virginia. Oh, certainly, but many a lady has to work now, the war, you know. When Dixie was being played, a dark haired young man sprang up from somewhere with most big gorilla yell and waved frantically his soft brimmed hat. Then he strayed through the smoke, dropped into vacant chair at our table and pulled out cigarettes. The evening was at the period when reservists thawed. One of us mentioned 3 Wasburgers to the waiter. The dark haired young man acknowledged his inclusion in the order by a smile and a nod. I hastened to ask him a question because I wanted to try out a theory I had. Would you mind telling me, I began, whether you are from the fist of E. Rushmore Coghlan banged the table and I was jarred into silence. Excuse me, said he, but that's the question I never liked to hear asked. What does it matter where a man is from? Is it fair to judge a man by his post office address? Why? I have seen Kentuckians who hated whiskey, Virginians who were descended from Pocahontas, Indians who hadn't written a novel, Mexicans who didn't wear velvet trousers with silver dollars sewed along the seams, funny Englishmen, spendthrift Yankees, cold-blooded Southerners, narrow-minded Westerners, and New Yorkers who were too busy to stop for an hour on the street to watch a one-armed grocer's clerk do up cranberries in paper bags. Let a man be man, and don't handicap him with label of any section. Pardon me, I said, but my curiosity was not altogether an idle one. I know the South, and when the band plays Dixie, I like to observe. I have formed the belief that man who applauds the air with special violence and ostensible sectional loyalty is invariably a native of either Syracuse, New York, or district between Murray Hill, Leitrim, and the Harlem River. This city. I was about to put my opinion to the test by inquiring of the gentleman when you interrupted with your own larger theory, I must confess. And now the dark-haired young man spoke to me, and it became evident that his mind also moved along its own set of grooves. I should like to be Periwinkle, said he mysteriously, on top of the valley and sing Tooraloo, Rilloo. This was clearly too obscure, so I turned again to Coghlan. I've been around the world 12 times, said he. I know an Eskimo in Upernavik who sends to Cincinnati for his neckties. And I saw a goat herder in Uruguay who won a prize in Battle Creek breakfast food puzzle competition. I pay rent on a room in Cairo, Egypt and another in Yokohama, all the year around. I've got slippers waiting for me in tea house in Shanghai and I don't have to tell them how to cook my eggs in Rio de Janeiro or Seattle. It's mighty little world. What's the use of bragging about being from North or South or the old manor house in the Dale or Euclid Avenue, Cleveland or Pikes Peak or Fairfax County, Virginia or Hooligan's Flat or any place? It will be a better world when we quit being fools about some mildewed town or 10 acres of swampland just because we happen to be born there. You seem to be genuine cosmopolite, I said admiringly, but it also seems that you would decry patriotism. A relic of the Stone Age, declared Coghlan warmly. We are all brothers. Chinamen, Englishmen, Zulus, Patagonians, and the people in the bend of Kaw River. Someday all this petty pride in one city or state or section or country will be wiped out, and we will all be the citizens of world, as we ought to be. But while you're wandering in foreign lands, I persisted, do not your thoughts revert to some spot, some deer, and some nary spot, interrupted E.R. Coghlan flippantly. The terrestrial globular planetary hunk of matter, slightly flattened at the poles, and known as Earth, is my abode. I have met a good many object bound citizens of this country abroad. I have seen men from Chicago sit in gondola in Venice on moonlight night and brag about their drainage canal. I have seen a southerner, on being introduced to the King of England, hand that monarch without batting his eye the information that his great aunt on his mother's side was related by marriage to Perkins of Charleston, a New Yorker who was kidnapped for ransom by some Afghanistan bandits. His people sent over the money and he came back to Kabul with the agent. Afghanistan. The natives said to him through an interpreter, well, not so slow, do you think? Oh, I don't know, says he. He begins to tell them about a cab driver at 6th Avenue and Broadway. Those ideas don't suit me. I am not tied down to anything that isn't 8,000 miles in diameter. Just put me down as E. Rushmore Coghlan, citizen of the terrestrial sphere. My cosmopolite made a large adieu and left me, for he thought he saw someone through a chatter and smoke whom he knew. So I was left with would-be Periwinkle, who was reduced to Wasburger without further ability to voice his aspirations to perch melodious upon the summit of a valley. I sat reflecting upon my evident cosmopolite, and wondering how the poet had managed to miss him. He was my discovery, and I believed in him. How was it? The men that breed from them, they traffic up and down, but cling to their cities, hem as a child to the mother's gown. Not so, E. Rushmore Coghlan, with the whole world for his. My meditations were interrupted by tremendous noise and conflict in another part of the cafe. I saw above the heads of seated patrons, E. Rushmore Coghlan and a stranger to me engaged in terrific battle. They fought between tables like titans, and glasses crashed, and men caught their hats up and were knocked down, and a brunette screamed and the blonde began to sing teasing. My cosmopolite was sustaining the pride and reputation of the earth when the waiters closed in on both combatants with their famous flying wedge formation and bore them outside, still resisting. I called McCarthy, one of the French garçons, and asked him the cause of conflict. The man with the red tie, that was my cosmopolite, said he got hot on accounts of things said about the bum sidewalks and water supply of the place he came from by the other guy. Why? Said I, bewildered. The man is a citizen of a world, a cosmopolite. He originally from Mattawamkeag, Maine, he said, continued McCarthy, and he wouldn't stand for no knocking the place. The phrase no knocking the place is a slang expression meaning no criticizing the place. The joke at the end of the story is that the cosmopolite who has spent the whole time bragging about how cosmopolitan he is, meaning that he does not have preferences for one place or another, is revealed to be as parochial as anyone else when his hometown is mentioned. But when we say home is where we belong, really it means home is where we feel we belong. The concepts of home and belonging are insipid and innocent. Our home is where we long to return when we are elsewhere in the world. In this sense, belonging is a notion invested with imaginative, romantic, and nostalgic ideas. O. Henry's fascinating cosmopolite lends itself to several insightful meanings and interpretations, especially in the times like ours, when the world is being aggressively shaped and conflicting trends of globalization and identity. Is it possible to subscribe to several identities without causing conflict, within or without? Are there such norms and values which can integrate all humanity regardless of the differential identities? I am Pradnya Talikoti. You are listening to My Personal Library, the podcast. You can subscribe, rate and review on Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get the podcast. To know more, please follow Pixels Unlimited on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you for your time. Keep on listening.